They sent me the text. Then they sent the email explaining why I couldn't come. It arrived on a Friday afternoon while I was knee-deep in renovation plans and coffee that had long gone cold. The message was from my sister Vanessa. Hey Maya. About the wedding invite. I need to talk to you before you RSVP. Call me when you can? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I already knew what she would say. This wasn't our first uncomfortable conversation disguised as casual check-in. I let the phone ring 3 times before answering. Hey V, I said, trying to sound busy but unbothered. Maya, hi. Her voice had that high-pitched quality it always took on when she was about to deliver bad news. Did you get the invitation? The invitation sat on my desk, heavy cream cardstock with silver embossing and a watercolor wash of blue and purple. It read, Andrew and Vanessa request the honor of your presence. Rosewood Manor. June 15th. Black tie. Just got it, I lied. Great, so, there's something I need to explain. She paused, clearly rehearsing words she'd already practiced. The venue has really strict capacity limits and Mom and Dad are inviting all their friends, and Andrew's family is huge, and you're uninviting me, I said flatly. Not uninviting. Just. Andrew's parents are covering most of the wedding, and they have expectations. You know how they are about appearances. I did know. The Prestons were old money, the kind of family that had a wing named after them. At the local hospital and summered in places that were verbs instead of nouns. It's just that there's all these investors coming, and with your situation right now. She trailed off. My situation. That's what they called my life choices. These days. My decision to walk away from my finance degree and cushy investment bank job to pursue hospitality management. My tiny apartment above the cafe where I worked weekends to make ends meet. The fact that I didn't have a husband or 5 children. Or a luxury car with heated seats. I understand, I said, though I didn't. It's not personal, Maya. It's just business. I know. I ran my finger along the edge of the invitation, feeling the expensive paper cut into my skin. Where are you having it? Rosewood Manor. Can you believe we got in? There's usually a 3-year waiting list, but Andrew's dad knows someone who knows someone. It's the most exclusive venue in the valley. Everyone who's anyone gets married there. I glanced down at the letterhead on the renovation proposal spread across my desk. Rosewood Manor Hospitality Group. Congratulations, I said. That's quite a venue. I know. It's a dream come true. I just wish. She paused. Maybe next time. Like when we do the baby shower or something. That little red heart emoji she sent after our call, it was the punctuation mark of people who wanted to look kind while cutting you to the bone. No confrontation, just a gentle removal. This wasn't the first time. There was the family portrait. At Christmas where I was positioned just far enough at the edge to be cropped out in the final version that made it to Mom's annual cards. The vacation where I was invited but mysteriously all the activities required couples only. The oversight when my promotion at the cafe wasn't mentioned in the family newsletter, but Vanessa's new luxury car was featured in a half-page spread. They never argued with me directly. They just slowly erased me until I became a smudge at the edges of family photos. Not because I'd done anything wrong, but because I refused to be the person they expected me to be. I walked back into my office, a converted storage room at the back of Rosewood Manor. The space was small but mine, with windows overlooking the sprawling gardens where wedding parties took their photos. On my desk sat the signed vendor contracts. For the Preston Michaels wedding, forwarded to me by our events coordinator for final approval. I'd raised their quote by 15%. Not out of spite, it was our standard rate for peak season. But I'd personally approved their bar package upgrade. And thrown in the vintage champagne service they'd requested. All signed off under M. Rosewood, managing director. They didn't know that the M stood for Maya. They didn't know that the woman they considered an embarrassment to bring to a high society wedding was the one signing off on their table arrangements. And menu selections. They didn't even know I still used our family name professionally. That's the thing about people who dismiss you, they stop looking for you in places where you might succeed. I didn't want to go to the wedding. I didn't need to witness Vanessa's perfect day or shake hands with Andrew's father who once asked me if people like me found it difficult to adjust to service jobs after failing in the real world. But I wasn't going to let them keep writing. This version of me, the disappointing daughter, the struggling sister, the family charity case. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I turned toward the small walnut shelf behind my desk and picked up a framed photograph. It showed a teenage girl in a black polo shirt with a sewn-on name tag, Maya, junior server. That was me at 16, working. My first job at Valley Ridge Country Club, the summer before senior year when everyone else was in Europe or at tennis camp. I kept it not as a reminder of humble beginnings, but as evidence of the journey. Of choosing my own path when everyone else had mapped out a different one for me. My mother used to say there were two types of people in this world, those who get seated at the head table and those who serve it. She said it during Sunday dinners when she'd had too much wine and started reminiscing about her debutante days. I was 14 the first time I realized which one she thought I was. By the time I finished college with a business degree from state instead of the Ivy League schools my parents preferred, I was supposed to join Preston Capital, the investment firm where Andrew's father was managing partner. There was an associate position waiting, with my name already printed on business cards, Maya Michaels, Junior Investment Associate. It lasted 7 weeks. Not because I couldn't handle the work, I consistently outperformed the other junior associates, but because I questioned things no one wanted questioned. Like why we were getting pension plans for hotel workers while approving massive bonuses for executives. Or why service staff were classified as contractors to avoid paying benefits. You're focusing on the wrong details, my father said during our last real conversation. No one cares about the housekeepers. But I did. Because I'd been one, working summers and weekends through college. I knew what it felt like to clean 20 rooms a day, to be invisible except when something went wrong, to count tips and pray they'd cover gas money. I want to work in hospitality, I told my father. Not just investing in it. Running it. He looked at me like I'd suggested a career in crime. You want to be a glorified maid? After all the opportunities we've given you? That was the last time we spoke honestly. After that, it was stilted holiday greetings and carefully neutral conversation about the weather. My mother still called. But the disappointment in her voice made the distance between us feel greater than any physical miles. I left for Chicago the following week. No goodbyes, no explanations. Just a resignation letter on my desk and a one-way ticket purchased with my own savings. I started at the Palmer, a boutique hotel in Lincoln Park, as an assistant in their events department. I worked 12-hour days, learned every position from housekeeping to front desk, and absorbed everything I could about running a successful property. Within 2 years, I was managing events. By year 3, I was assistant general manager. I lived in a tiny apartment, saved every penny, and built a reputation as someone who understood both luxury standards and the reality of operations. That Christmas, my mother sent the family photo. Everyone in red and green, posed in front of their grand staircase. Vanessa was front and center, showing off her engagement ring. I was noticeably absent. My mother's note said, "We missed you at the photo session. Hope whatever work thing you had was worth it." I hadn't been invited to any photo session. A week later, I saw the Instagram post from my cousin Tyler. A screenshot from the family group chat I'd been removed from months earlier. Someone had posted a photo of me in my Palmer uniform, straightening chairs before a wedding. The caption read, "Looks like Maya's living her dream as a party planner. At least she gets to be at fancy events, even if she's working them." Rolling on the floor laughing, no one defended me. Not even my godmother Ellen, who used to sneak me architecture magazines and tell me I could design my own path. That's when I realized, you don't have to be dramatically disowned to be family. You can simply be faded out, like a photograph left too long in the sun. Eventually, even you start to believe you were never fully in the picture. So I made peace with it. I stopped waiting for invitations and started building something they couldn't ignore. I moved to Riverside Valley, a small town 3 hours from my hometown. Not because it was special, it wasn't on any best places lists or featured in travel magazines. I chose it because a historical property there had just been listed for sale, Rosewood Manor, a crumbling estate with good bones and a terrible reputation. The gardens were overgrown, the ballroom desperately needed updating, and the guest rooms hadn't been renovated since the early 90s. But standing in that ballroom for the first time, with sunlight filtering through dust-covered windows and illuminating the intricate crown molding, I saw what it could be. Not just a wedding venue, but a destination. A place where memories weren't just made but crafted with intention. I pulled every penny I had, took out loans that made my financial advisor friends cringe, and made an offer that was accepted mostly because no one else wanted the headache. The first year was brutal. I lived in one of the unfinished guest rooms, showering in the staff locker room and eating whatever the kitchen was testing for new menu items. I worked alongside the contractors, learned to patch plaster, and developed an encyclopedic knowledge of historical restoration regulations. The local business community dismissed me as that city girl with delusions of grandeur. Banks refused additional financing. Vendors demanded payment up front because they didn't believe I'd still be in business in 6 months. But I watched. I learned. I adapted. I noticed that local brides wanted tradition but also Instagram moments. That corporate clients needed reliable technology but craved experiences they couldn't get in city hotels. That wedding guests remembered three things: the comfort of their beds, the quality of the food, and whether staff knew their names by the second day. So I focused there. I hired the best chef in the region away from a stuffy country club by promising him creative freedom. I invested in beds that cost more than my first car. And I trained every staff member to treat guests like they were hosting friends in their own home. Slowly, the bookings increased. First local weddings, then corporate retreats, then destination events for couples from Chicago and New York who wanted authentic charm without sacrificing luxury. I renamed it simply Rosewood. No manor, no pretension. Just quality and attention to detail that spoke for itself. I never used my full name in marketing materials. The website listed the owner as M. Rosewood, which everyone assumed was a nod to the property name, not my own. I wasn't hiding. I just wasn't announcing myself. There's power in being underestimated, in building something without the weight of expectations. But in my office, behind my computer where no one could see, I kept that framed photo from the country club. Maya, junior server. Not because I was ashamed of where I'd started, but because I was proud of where those humble beginnings had taken me. For years after opening, Rosewood was named one of the top wedding venues in the Midwest by a prestigious travel magazine. 6 months after that, I purchased the struggling vineyard next door and added a winery to our offerings. By year 5, we had a 2-year waiting list for peak season weddings and were turning away more clients than we accepted. That's when the email from Vanessa arrived. An inquiry through our general booking form for a June wedding. Looking for the most exclusive experience, she wrote. Price is no object. We've heard wonderful things and understand the owner is very selective. We'd be honored to be considered. I recognized the language of privilege, the assumption that exclusivity and selection were more important than warmth or connection. It was exactly how our parents had taught us to approach luxury. I forwarded the inquiry to Jessie, our events director, with a brief note: handle like any other request. Standard package pricing. Jessie was puzzled. Don't you want to take this one yourself? It's your sister. She doesn't know that, I said. And I'd like to keep it that way for now. Vanessa and Andrew visited the property the following week. I watched from my office window as Jessie gave them the tour, pointing out the gardens where ceremonies were typically held, the grand ballroom with its restored chandelier, the intimate dining spaces for rehearsal dinners. Vanessa looked exactly as I remembered, just with more expensive highlights and a designer handbag. Andrew walked slightly ahead of her, checking his watch repeatedly and asking questions about Wi-Fi capabilities and helicopter landing restrictions. I stayed out of sight. Not out of fear or shame, but because I wanted them to choose Rosewood for what it was, not because of, or in spite of, who owned it. They booked the venue that day, putting down a deposit that was larger than most people's entire wedding budgets. Vanessa immediately began making special requests: custom lighting, imported flowers, menu adjustments that would require our chef to order ingredients from 3 different countries. Jessie handled most of it, consulting with me only when the requests became excessive. I approved some and gently declined others, always through proper channels, never directly. The mother of the bride is intense, Jessie told me after one particularly demanding phone call. She keeps dropping names of people she knows, like we should be impressed. And she mentioned at least 5 times that the groom's father is some big-shot investor who could do amazing things for Rosewood. I smiled. Some things never changed. As the wedding date approached, the requests became more elaborate. Vanessa wanted to reposition our grand piano to better frame her entrance. Andrew's father demanded that we close to other guests the entire weekend, despite only booking rooms for half our capacity. His mother requested that we replace the artwork in the main hall because she found it too modern for wedding photos. I approved the piano move, declined the exclusive booking unless they paid for all rooms, and politely explained that our artwork was part of Rosewood's aesthetic and identity. Through it all, I maintained my distance. I reviewed contracts, signed off on special orders, and occasionally watched their planning meetings from the privacy of my office. Not once did my name come up. Not once did Vanessa mention that the sister she'd uninvited might have insights into planning the perfect wedding. 1 week before the wedding, my mother and Vanessa scheduled a final walkthrough. I made sure to be in a budget meeting across town. But that evening, I received a text from an unknown number: "They don't see you, but I do. What you've built is extraordinary." Ellen, my godmother, had been part of the walkthrough. After all these years, she was still the only one who looked beyond the surface. I didn't respond, but I kept the message. 2 days before the wedding, I made a decision. I wouldn't hide, but I wouldn't make a scene either. This was Vanessa's day, after all. My revelation wouldn't be about revenge, it would be about reclaiming my own narrative. I left instructions with our staff: treat the Michaels and Preston families exactly as they would any other guests, with warm professionalism and attention to detail. No special treatment, no bending of our usual rules. And most importantly, no mentioning my name or position. The night before the wedding, I reviewed every detail one last time. The ceremony was set for 4:30 p.m. in the Rose Garden. Cocktail hour would follow on the West Terrace, with dinner and dancing in the grand ballroom until midnight. The color scheme was silver and dusty blue, with touches of burgundy in the floral arrangements. The menu featured our chef's signature dishes, with wine pairings from our vineyard. Everything was perfect, down to the hand-calligraphed place. Cards and the vintage champagne coupe glasses Vanessa had specifically requested. As I finished my final checks, I passed by the bridal suite where Vanessa would be getting ready the next day. On impulse, I left a small gift box on the vanity. Inside was a silver locket with our grandmother's initials engraved on the back, something old, something borrowed. No note, no explanation. Just a small gesture from one sister to another, regardless of the distance between us. Then I went to my apartment above the east wing, not the grand owner's suite that everyone assumed I lived in, but a modest space. With a view of the hills and enough room for my books and the few mementos I'd kept from my previous life. I laid out my outfit for the next day, not a bridesmaid's dress, but a simple charcoal gray suit, professional and understated. Tomorrow would change things, one way or another. Not because I planned some dramatic revelation, but because truth has a way of emerging when people least expect it. As I drifted off to sleep, I thought about the long journey from that teenage server to the owner of Rosewood. How sometimes the greatest success isn't proving others wrong, but proving yourself right. How building something meaningful isn't about revenge, but about vision. The uninvitation had stung, yes. But in a strange way, it had also set me free. Free from expectations I never wanted to fulfill. Free to create something authentic instead of living someone else's definition of success. Tomorrow, my sister would have her perfect wedding. And for the first time in years, I would step fully into the light of who I'd become, not for their approval, but for my own completion. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and perfect, with just enough clouds to keep the sun from being too harsh for photographs. I woke early, as I always did on event days, and began my usual routine. Coffee on the terrace, reviewing the day's timeline, and a quick walk through the gardens to center myself before the chaos began. The first vendors arrived at 9 a.m., florists carrying buckets of peonies and garden roses, rental companies delivering the special chairs Vanessa had insisted on, musicians setting up for the ceremony. I stayed in the background, dressed in simple black pants and a blouse that could easily be mistaken for a staff uniform. In the hustle of wedding preparations, no one looked twice at me. By noon, the bridal party had arrived. I watched from my office window as Vanessa emerged from a white SUV, surrounded by friends in matching robes, all of them taking selfies and squealing with excitement. My mother followed, already looking anxious, directing the drivers where to put the luggage, and checking her watch repeatedly. They disappeared into the bridal suite, and I returned to my work, answering emails and reviewing the following week's events. Just another Saturday at Rosewood. At 2 p.m., Jessie knocked on my door. "Maya, we might have a situation." I looked up from my computer. "What kind of situation?" "Your father is insisting on meeting the owner. Says he wants to discuss some investment opportunities and network with whoever was smart enough to turn this place around." I took a deep breath. "Tell him the owner is unavailable until after the reception. If he persists, direct him to me as the managing director." Jessie raised an eyebrow. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure. This is Vanessa's day. Let's keep it that way for now." The afternoon unfolded according to plan. Guests began arriving at 3:30, dressed in summer finery, exclaiming over the restored architecture and manicured gardens. I stood near the back entrance, clipboard in hand, easily mistaken for another coordinator or manager rather than the owner. I overheard snippets of conversation as they passed. "Can you believe they got in here? I heard there's a 3-year waiting list. Andrew's father must have pulled some serious strings. The owner is some reclusive genius, never appears at events, apparently. If only they knew." At 4:15, I slipped into the back of the ceremony area, positioning myself behind a sculptural arrangement of branches and roses where I could observe without being obvious. The string quartet played softly as guests were seated according to their importance, closest to the front for family and friends with influence, further back for distant relatives and obligatory invites. I spotted my father in the front row, looking exactly as I remembered but with more gray at his temples. He sat straight-backed and proud, shaking hands with Andrew's father and laughing too loudly at something that probably wasn't funny. My mother fussed with her fascinator, checking her reflection in her compact mirror between greeting guests. At precisely 4:30, the music changed to Pachelbel's Canon, predictable but classic, and the procession began. Bridesmaids in silver blue dresses, then Vanessa on our father's arm. Her dress was everything I would have expected: architectural, dramatic, clearly designer and clearly expensive. She looked beautiful but nervous, smiling tightly as she passed through the crowd. I watched as my father gave her away, as vows were exchanged beneath the rose-covered arbor I had personally designed during Rosewood's renovation. It was surreal, my sister's most important day happening in the space I had created, without her having any idea. The ceremony was brief and traditional. No personal vows, no readings that weren't standard. Everything carefully curated for appearance rather than meaning. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, the crowd applauded politely, and I slipped away before the recessional began. During cocktail hour, I stayed in my office, watching the security feeds and texting occasional instructions to staff. The bar was running low on the specialty cocktail, a server needed backup in the northwest corner, a guest had spilled red wine on the stone terrace and it needed immediate attention. I changed into my charcoal gray suit, applied minimal makeup, and twisted my hair into a simple knot at the nape of my neck. Professional, polished, but not trying to stand out. Then I took a deep breath and headed toward the grand ballroom where dinner would soon be served. I was crossing the main hall when I nearly collided with my mother. "Excuse me," she said absently, not looking up from her phone. Then she paused and looked again, confusion crossing her features. "Maya? 5 years is a long time." I'd lost the softness in my face, gained confidence in my posture. My clothes were better quality now, my haircut more expensive. But I was still recognizable as her younger daughter. "Hello, Mom," I said calmly. She looked around frantically, as if checking who might see us talking. "What are you doing here? Did Vanessa change her mind?" "No," I said simply. "I work here." Relief flooded her face. "Oh. You should have said something. You got a job at Rosewood? That's wonderful, dear. Very prestigious place. Is it a management position?" Of course she would assume that I'd somehow climbed the ranks somewhere else and landed a job at this exclusive venue. That my presence was merely a fortunate coincidence. "Something like that," I replied. "How are you? You look well." She launched into a brief, surface-level update. Their country club had renovated, Dad's business was thriving, her garden club had won some award. Not once did she ask how I'd been all these years. Not once did she express any real curiosity about my life. "I should get back to Vanessa," she said finally. "You know how brides are on their big day. All nerves and expectations." She hesitated. "It's good to see you, Maya. Perhaps you could stop by sometime when things are less hectic." "Perhaps," I said, knowing I wouldn't. "Enjoy the evening, Mom. Everything has been carefully planned to ensure it's perfect." She gave me an odd look at that, but then hurried away toward the bridal suite. I watched her go, feeling strangely calm. No anger, no hurt, just a quiet recognition of how little had changed between us despite everything that had changed within me. At 6:30, guests began moving into the ballroom for dinner. I stationed myself near the entrance, greeting people with a professional smile, answering questions about the property, directing them to their tables. Most barely glanced at me, too caught up in the spectacle of the room itself, the soaring ceilings, the crystal chandeliers, the perfect lighting that made everyone look their best. I spotted my godmother Ellen across the room. Unlike everyone else, she was looking directly at me, a small smile playing at her lips. She raised her champagne glass slightly in my direction, a silent toast that spoke volumes. I inclined my head in acknowledgement. Dinner service began promptly at 7. Our chef had outdone himself with a seasonal menu featuring local ingredients and artistic presentation. Wine flowed freely, conversations grew louder, and speeches began as the main course was cleared. Andrew's father spoke first, a predictable talk about legacy and family connections that sounded more like a business pitch than a wedding toast. My father followed with anecdotes about Vanessa's childhood achievements and how she had always been the perfect daughter. I noticed he carefully avoided any mention of having another child at all. As dessert was being served, I made my way toward the back of the room where Jessie was supervising the staff. "Everything's running perfectly," she said. "Though Andrew's father has asked 3 times to meet with the owner. He's quite persistent." "I'll handle it," I replied. After the cake cutting, no disruptions to the schedule. The cake was a 5-tier masterpiece, each layer a different flavor, decorated with sugar flowers so realistic they could have been plucked from our gardens. Vanessa and Andrew performed the traditional cutting, feeding each other small bites. With practiced smiles while photographers captured every moment. As guests returned to their tables with cake slices, I noticed my father breaking away from his table and approaching the bar where Jessie stood. Even from a distance, I could see his expression, determined, slightly entitled, the look he always had when he was about to insist on something. It was time. I crossed the room purposefully, reaching Jessie just as my father was saying, "I'm sure the owner would want to meet me. Just tell them Richard Michaels would like a brief word." "Mr. Michaels," I said smoothly, extending my hand. "I understand you've been asking to meet with the owner." He turned, irritation flashing across his face before recognition dawned. He froze, hand half extended, mouth slightly open. "Maya? It's been a while," I said calmly. You work here?" He managed, echoing my mother's assumption. In a manner of speaking. I gestured toward a quiet corner of the room. "Perhaps we could speak privately for a moment?" He followed me woodenly, clearly trying to process my presence. When we reached a relatively quiet spot near one of the tall windows overlooking the illuminated gardens, I turned to face him. "You look well, Dad," I said, meaning it. "Congratulations on Vanessa's wedding. Everything has turned out beautifully." "What are you doing here, Maya?" he asked, his voice low. "Was this your idea of some kind of statement? Showing up as what, a server? A manager?" "I'm not making any statement," I replied. "I'm simply doing my job." "And what job is that exactly?" His tone was dismissive, the way it always had been when discussing my career choices. I met his gaze directly. "I'm the owner and managing director of Rosewood Hospitality Group." He stared at me, disbelief evident in every line of his face. "That's not possible." "It's not only possible, it's fact. I purchased the property 5 years ago when it was failing and in danger of being demolished for condominiums. I've since expanded to include the vineyard next door and a small restaurant in town. We're currently one of the top-rated wedding and event venues in the Midwest." He shook his head slightly, as if trying to clear it. "If this is true, why didn't you say something when Vanessa booked the venue? Why the secrecy? Would it have mattered?" I asked quietly. "Would Vanessa still have chosen Rosewood if she'd known it was mine? Would you have allowed it?" He had no answer for that. "I didn't hide my identity to create drama," I continued. "Vanessa chose Rosewood because it's exactly what she wanted for her perfect day. The fact that it's mine is irrelevant to that choice." My father looked around the room, taking in the impeccable details, the satisfied guests, the flawless service. For the first time in my life, I saw something like reassessment in his eyes. "You did all this?" he asked, gesturing to encompass the room, the building, everything. "I did. Every renovation decision, every hiring choice, every detail of the experience. This is what I built when you thought I was failing." He was silent for a long moment. "Then, why hospitality? With your education, your connections, you could have been another investment banker? Another asset manager shuffling paper wealth from one portfolio to another?" I shook my head. "I wanted to create something real. Something that matters to people. We don't just host weddings here, Dad. We create memories that last lifetimes." "It's a service business," he said, but the usual dismissal in his tone was less certain. "Yes. We serve people. We make their important moments better. We treat everyone, guests and staff, with dignity. That matters to me." Before he could respond, Andrew's father appeared at his elbow, slightly flushed from champagne. "Richard. There you are. Have you managed to track down the elusive owner yet? I've got some ideas for expansion I'd love to discuss." My father looked at me, then back at Preston. Something shifted in his expression, a decision being made. "James, I'd like you to meet my daughter, Maya Michaels." A pause, almost imperceptible. "She's the owner of Rosewood." Preston's eyes widened. In surprise, darting between us as he processed this information. "Your daughter? But I thought." He collected himself quickly, extending his hand. "James Preston. Pleasure to meet you, Ms. Michaels." Richard never mentioned his daughter was such an accomplished businesswoman. "There are many things my father hasn't mentioned," I said, shaking his hand firmly. "But I've been looking forward to hosting your son's wedding at Rosewood. I hope everything has met your expectations." "Exceeded them," he said automatically, still looking confused. "Though I'm curious why you didn't introduce yourself when we first toured the property." "Maya believes in letting Rosewood's quality speak for itself," my father interjected smoothly, surprising me. "A philosophy that clearly works, given the venue's reputation." Preston nodded thoughtfully. "Impressive strategy. We should discuss some investment opportunities. Our firm has been looking to diversify into experiential luxury properties, and Rosewood would make an excellent addition to our portfolio." "Thank you for your interest," I said politely, "but Rosewood isn't for sale or investment. We're privately held and intend to stay that way." Preston's smile tightened. Everyone has a price, Ms. Michaels. Perhaps we could discuss what yours might be. Some things aren't about price, Mr. Preston. Rosewood is one of them. My father was watching this exchange with an expression I couldn't quite read, something between surprise and what might have been pride, though that seemed unlikely. You'll have to excuse us, James, he said finally. Family matter to discuss. Why don't you check on the mother of the groom? I believe she was looking for you earlier. When Preston reluctantly departed, my father turned back to me. You're really not interested in investment capital? The Preston Group could open doors for you. International expansion, multiple properties. I'm expanding at my own pace, on my own terms, I said. We're opening a second location next year, a historic property in Michigan that we're currently renovating. Fully funded through our own operations and selective financing that doesn't involve giving up control. He nodded slowly. Your sister doesn't know, does she? No. And I'd prefer to keep it that way today. This is her wedding, not my revelation. Moment. Something like respect flickered in his eyes. Always the considerate one. Even when we weren't considerate to you. It was the closest thing to an acknowledgement of their treatment of me that I'd ever heard from him. Not quite an apology, but a recognition. I should get back to work, I said, glancing around the room. The evening is running smoothly, but there's always something that needs attention. Of course, he replied. Then, awkwardly, you've done. Well, Maya. Very well. Your mother and we may have been wrong about some things. May have been? I couldn't help the small smile that touched my lips. He actually chuckled, a short, surprised sound. Definitely were. About many things. He hesitated. Would you consider joining us for brunch tomorrow? Just family. I think Vanessa would be interested to learn about her venue's ownership. I considered the offer. Not a full reconciliation, not an erasing of the past, but perhaps a beginning. I'll be there, I said. I'm hosting it, after all. As I turned to walk away, he called after me softly, Maya? That junior server photo you mentioned, do you still have it? I paused. I do. It's in my office. I'd like to see it. Sometime. To remind me. Remind you of what? Of how wrong I can be. And how right you were to follow your own path. I nodded once, then moved back into the flow of the reception, checking in with staff, ensuring the band was set up for the first dance, making sure everything continued to run perfectly for my sister's wedding. As the evening progressed, I caught glimpses of my family through new eyes. My mother, laughing genuinely with old friends instead of just performing happiness. My father, watching the room with a thoughtful expression instead of his usual calculating one. Vanessa, radiant in her expensive gown, dancing with her new husband beneath the chandeliers I had personally selected during Rosewood's renovation. They had their world. I had built mine. And for the first time, those worlds were overlapping without conflict. Around 10 p.m., as the dancing was in full swing, my godmother Ellen found me near the dessert table. I always knew you'd prove them wrong, she said without preamble. Though I never imagined you'd do it quite so spectacularly. I smiled. I didn't do it to prove them wrong. I did it because it was right for me. Even better. She linked her arm through mine. Walk with me? I'd love to hear how you transformed this place. I remember when it was practically falling down. We strolled through the quieter areas of Rosewood while I explained the renovation process, the business model, the philosophy that guided every decision. Ellen listened intently, asking insightful questions that reminded me why I'd always felt she was the one adult who truly saw me. Your grandmother would be so proud, she said eventually. She had that same quiet determination. That same vision of hospitality as something meaningful, not just transactional. I never really knew her, I said. She died when I was young. But you're more like her than anyone else in the family. She started with nothing too, you know. Built a small catering business in the 1950s when women weren't supposed to run companies. Your grandfather may have had the Michaels name and money, but she had the work ethic and heart. I hadn't known that. My family rarely spoke about my grandmother except in terms of the recipes she'd left behind or the jewelry that had been distributed among female relatives. Why didn't anyone ever tell me that story? I asked. Ellen shrugged. The family prefers the narrative where success comes easily, through connections and birthright. Your grandmother's struggle didn't fit that story. Just like yours doesn't. We had reached the small courtyard garden, my favorite spot on the property. String lights twinkled overhead, and the scent of night-blooming jasmine filled the air. Will you stay in touch this time? Ellen asked. Or will you disappear again once the wedding is over? I considered the question. I'm not hiding anymore. But I'm not sure what in touch looks like with people who spent years pretending I didn't exist. Start small, she suggested. Holiday cards. Occasional family dinners. Let them see the real you, on your terms. Some will rise to the occasion. Others won't. But you'll know you gave them the chance. Is that what my grandmother did? Eventually. On her own terms, when she was ready. Not to seek approval, but to give them the opportunity to know her. As she truly was. Ellen squeezed my arm gently. The most powerful thing you can do isn't to prove them wrong, Maya. It's to be so completely right in your own choices that they have to question theirs. We returned to the reception, where the party was still going strong. As I surveyed the room one last time, ensuring everything was perfect, I caught my father watching me from across the dance floor. He raised his glass slightly, an echo of Ellen's earlier gesture, a silent acknowledgement. I nodded in return, then slipped away to my office. There, on my desk, sat the framed photo, Maya, junior server. I picked it up, studying the face of that teenage girl who had no idea where her path would lead, but knew it had to be her own. Tomorrow would bring brunch, revelations, perhaps the beginning of reconciliation with some family members. But tonight, in this moment, I simply allowed myself to feel the quiet satisfaction of having built something meaningful, not despite their rejection, but because of the freedom it gave me to define success on my own terms. As I placed the photo back on my desk, my phone buzzed with a text from Jessie, bride asking for more champagne for head table. Approve? I smiled and texted back, give them the reserve vintage. On the house. Some victories are loud and dramatic. Others are quiet acts of generosity from a position of strength. Tonight, I chose the latter. The reception ended at midnight exactly as planned. Guests departed in waves of laughter and goodbyes, collecting their personalized welcome bags as they left, another touch I'd insisted on, each one containing house-made pastries for morning, local artisanal water, and lavender sachets from our gardens to remember the day by. I stood in the shadows of the grand entrance, watching as the last cars pulled away, their headlights cutting through the darkness. The cleanup crew had already begun their careful choreography, removing centerpieces, breaking down tables, preserving anything the bride and groom might want to keep. Everything went perfectly, Jessie said, appearing at my side with her clipboard. Not a single complaint all night. That might be a record. The team was exceptional, I replied. Make sure everyone gets the bonus we discussed. Already noted. She hesitated. Your father came looking for you, just before they left. I told him you were handling an issue with the kitchen. Thank you. Was it okay? Seeing them all again? I considered the question. It was clarifying, I said finally. Like putting on glasses after years of blurry vision. Everything's sharper now, but not necessarily harder to look at. She nodded, though I wasn't sure she fully understood. How could she? She hadn't been there for the years of subtle erasure, the careful excising of me from family narratives. But she'd been there for the building of something new, and that counted for more. Get some rest, I told her. Tomorrow's brunch will be simple by comparison, but still needs our attention. After Jessie left, I walked slowly through the empty ballroom. The space felt different now, not just quiet, but contemplative, as if the walls themselves were absorbing the echoes of celebration. I straightened a forgotten napkin, adjusted a chair pushed askew, switched off the last of the accent lights. This was always my favorite part of any event, the quiet aftermath when I could feel the satisfaction of a job well done without anyone watching. No performance, no expectations, just the peaceful knowledge that we had created something meaningful, even if temporary. Back in my apartment, I kicked off my shoes and sat by the window, looking out at the property bathed in moonlight. The gardens, the terrace, the elegant drive, all of it built from my vision, my determination. Not inherited, not given, but earned through countless late nights and early mornings, through decisions both large and small, through believing in something when no one else did. I thought about what tomorrow would bring. The family brunch was set for 10 a.m. in our garden pavilion, a glass structure overlooking the rose gardens, usually reserved for intimate ceremonies or high-end corporate retreats. I'd approved a menu of elevated comfort foods, my chef's famous brioche French toast, seasonal fruit compotes, savory egg soufflés, things that felt special without being pretentious. Would Vanessa be angry when she learned the truth? Would my mother find a way to rewrite this new reality to fit her preferred narrative? Would my father maintain the surprising respect he'd shown tonight, or revert to his dismissive judgment in the morning light? I realized, with quiet surprise, that their reactions mattered less to me than they once would have. I was curious, yes, but not dependent on their approval. That freedom, to care without being controlled by that caring, felt like the most valuable thing I'd built over these years. I slept deeply that night, without the anxious dreams that had plagued me in the days leading up to the wedding. When I woke at 6 a.m., my usual time, I felt rested and clear-headed. I began my morning as I always did, yoga on the small terrace outside my bedroom, a shower in my simply appointed bathroom, a light breakfast while reviewing emails. By 8 a.m., I was dressed in tailored black pants and a soft blue blouse. Professional but approachable, neither hiding nor showcasing my position. The breakfast team was already prepping when I arrived in the kitchen. Chef Marcus was piping herb butter into perfectly formed omelets while his sous chef arranged berries in geometric patterns. "Good morning," I said, accepting the coffee a server offered me. "Everything on schedule?" "Of course," Marcus replied without looking up from his work. "Though I still don't understand why you're hosting this personally. Don't they know who you are yet?" "Some do. Some don't. That changes today." He shook his head slightly. "Your family has strange dynamics, boss." "You have no idea," I murmured, taking a sip of the perfectly prepared coffee. I spent the next hour checking in with various departments: housekeeping about the guest room turnover, maintenance about a minor issue with one of the garden fountains, front desk about late checkouts. Normal Sunday morning operations, despite the abnormal situation unfolding in my personal life. At 9:45, I walked to the garden pavilion for a final inspection. The space was bathed in morning light, making the white linens glow and the silver service gleam. Fresh flowers from our gardens adorned each table, not the formal arrangements from the wedding, but wilder, more natural compositions that felt intimate and welcoming. In the center of the main table, I'd placed a small silver frame. Inside was a photograph I'd found in my files, Rosewood Manor as it had been when I purchased it, crumbling and neglected, next to an image of Rosewood today, restored and thriving. Before and after. Transformation made visible. At precisely 10 a.m., they began to arrive. My parents first, looking slightly uncertain as they entered the space. Then Vanessa and Andrew, both wearing designer sunglasses despite the gentle morning light, clearly slightly hungover but making an effort to appear fresh. Andrew's parents followed, along with a few close family members who had stayed overnight, my aunt and uncle, a couple of cousins, godmother Ellen. "Good morning," I greeted them at the entrance. "I hope everyone slept well." Maya, my mother, said, still looking slightly stunned to see me in this context. "We didn't expect you to be working today." I smiled slightly. "I'm not exactly working. I'm hosting." Before she could respond, servers appeared with mimosas and coffee. The group moved toward the tables, taking seats somewhat awkwardly, clearly unsure of the protocol. I let them settle before taking my place at the head of the main table, a position that clearly surprised several of them. Vanessa leaned toward me, her voice low. "What's going on, Maya? Dad was being weird last night, saying something about you having a surprise. And now you're here, acting like, I don't know, like I belong?" I suggested mildly. She had the grace to flush slightly. "That's not what I meant. Let's enjoy breakfast first," I said. "Then we can talk." The first course arrived. Fresh fruit with honey lavender yogurt and house-made granola. As everyone began to eat, the initial tension eased somewhat. Food has a way of creating common ground, of giving people something to focus on besides uncomfortable truths. "This is extraordinary," Andrew's mother said, taking a delicate bite of her yogurt parfait. "The honey, it tastes different." "It's from our own hives," I explained. "We installed them 3 years ago on the south property. The flavor changes slightly season to season, depending on what's blooming in the gardens." "Your hives," she repeated, confused. I met my father's gaze across the table. He gave me a slight nod, permission, or perhaps encouragement. "Yes," I said, addressing the table at large. "Rosewood's hives. I'm not sure how many of you know this, but I'm the owner and managing director of Rosewood Hospitality Group. I founded the company 5 years ago when I purchased this property and began its restoration." Silence fell over the table. Vanessa's fork clattered against her plate. Andrew's father frowned, clearly recalculating some internal assessment. My mother's hand flew to her pearls, a gesture so predictable it almost made me smile. "That's impossible," Vanessa finally said. You worked at some hotel in Chicago. As an event planner or something." "I did work at the Palmer in Chicago," I confirmed. "I was assistant general manager there before I left to start Rosewood. It was excellent training for what I wanted to build. But this place is," Andrew began, gesturing around at the elegant surroundings. "Successful? Beautiful? Worth millions?" I supplied. "Yes, it is. It's also the result of 5 years of 18-hour days, careful financial management, and a clear vision of what hospitality should be." My mother found her voice. "Why didn't you tell us? All this time, we thought you were struggling, living in some apartment, working for other people." "You assumed that," I corrected gently. "You never actually asked me about my life." "Not in Any meaningful way. She opened her mouth to protest, then closed it again, recognition dawning in her eyes. So when we booked this place for the wedding? Vanessa trailed off, the implications sinking in. You booked it because it was exactly what you wanted, I said. The reputation, the exclusivity, the aesthetic. You chose Rosewood on its own merits, not because of any connection to me. And you let us, she said, something like accusation in her tone. Yes, I acknowledged. I wanted to see if what I'd built could stand on its own, even with the people who had dismissed my career choices. It was important to me that Rosewood be judged for what it is, not who owns it. Andrew's father leaned forward, suddenly interested. So you're the mysterious M. Rosewood. The one no one ever meets. M. Michaels Rosewood, technically. I use both names professionally, though most people only see the initial. Clever, he said, reassessing me visibly. Creating mystique around the brand. Makes people want it more when they think they can't have direct access. I shook my head. That wasn't a marketing strategy. I simply prefer to let my work speak for itself. The second course arrived, the promised brioche French toast with maple bourbon reduction, crispy bacon, and fresh herb omelets. The interruption gave everyone a moment to process what they'd learned, to recalibrate their understanding of who I was and what that meant for their own narratives. As they began eating again, my father spoke for the first time. Maya has built something remarkable here. Something that deserves our respect and recognition. The simple statement, coming from him, carried weight that my own words couldn't have. I saw its impact ripple across the table, my mother's subtle straightening, Vanessa's widened eyes, the slight nods from relatives who had always taken their cues from my father. I had no idea, Vanessa said quietly. All this time, you were. Why didn't you ever correct us? When we talked about you like you were? She trailed off, unable to finish the thought. Like I was failing? Struggling? Not living up to the Michaels name? I supplied. Because I needed to prove it. To myself first, not to you. And because sometimes being underestimated is the greatest advantage you can have. My godmother Ellen smiled at that, raising her mimosa in a subtle toast. But we're family, my mother protested. Families support each other. Do they? I asked, keeping my tone curious rather than accusatory. When was the last time anyone asked me about my work? My goals? My achievements? When was the last time I was included in family celebrations without conditions attached? Silence fell again, heavier this time. The invitation, Vanessa said finally. I uninvited you to my wedding. At your own venue. Yes. And you still. You made sure everything was perfect. You didn't sabotage anything or charge us extra or. She shook her head, disbelief evident in her expression. Of course not, I said, genuinely surprised. This was your wedding, Vanessa. Why would I do anything to diminish that? Because we've been terrible to you, she said, unexpected tears welling in her eyes. All of us. For years. I hadn't expected this, not tears, not frank acknowledgement. I'd prepared for defensiveness, for them to find ways to reframe the situation that preserved their self-image. This raw honesty caught me off guard. Not terrible, I said carefully. Just, focused on a very specific definition of success. One that didn't include the path I chose. One that was wrong, my father said, surprising me again. I was wrong, Maya. About what you could build. About what matters. The admission hung in the air between us, weightier than any apology, coming from a man who rarely acknowledged mistakes. Andrew cleared his throat awkwardly. So, does this mean my father-in-law's daughter owns our wedding venue? That's quite a plot twist. The comment broke the tension, drawing surprised laughter from around the table. Even Vanessa managed a watery smile. The truth is, I said, taking advantage of the lighter moment, I didn't reveal myself earlier because I wanted your wedding to be about you, Vanessa. Not about my relationship with the family or who owns what. You deserved your perfect day. Without complications. She studied me for a long moment. That's actually really kind, considering everything. Kindness and business aren't mutually exclusive, I replied. That's something I learned building Rosewood. The most successful hospitality comes from genuine care, not just transactions. My mother reached across the table, tentatively touching my hand. Would you show us? The property, what you've built. I'd like to understand. The request surprised me, not just the words, but the sincerity behind them. For perhaps the first time in my adult life, my mother seemed genuinely interested. In my world. I'd be happy to, I said, squeezing her hand briefly before releasing it. After breakfast concluded, I led them on a tour of Rosewood, not the standard guest tour, but the owner's perspective. I showed them the behind-the-scenes operations that made the magic happen, the immaculate kitchens where Chef Marcus created his renowned menus, the laundry facilities that process thousands of linens each week, the staff areas designed with comfort and dignity in mind. I explained the sustainability initiatives we'd implemented: solar panels discreetly installed on south-facing roofs, the kitchen garden that supplied much of our produce, the composting system that reduced our waste by nearly 60%. Every decision was intentional, I explained as we walked through the rose gardens where Vanessa had been married just yesterday. From the heritage varieties we planted to the irrigation system that conserves water, nothing here is accidental or unconsidered. It's extraordinary, my father said, studying the property with new eyes. Not just beautiful, but thoughtful. Sustainable. The business model too, I added. We're profitable year-round, not just during wedding season. Corporate retreats, culinary weekends, wellness programs in the slower months. Diversified revenue streams that support consistent staffing, no seasonal layoffs. Andrew's father had been listening intently. You've created genuine value here. Not just extracting it, but building it. That's rare. Coming from him, a man who had made his fortune largely through acquisition and restructuring, the observation carried particular weight. The tour concluded at my office, the space I'd intentionally avoided showing them yesterday. Unlike the grandeur of the public areas, my workspace was simple and functional. Large windows overlooked the property, walls lined with books on hospitality, design, and business. My desk was substantial but not showy, covered with current projects and renovation plans. And there, prominently displayed on a side table, was the framed name tag, Maya, Junior Server. Vanessa noticed it immediately. You kept that? Even after? Especially after, I said. It reminds me of where I started. And why? My father approached the frame, picking it up carefully. I remember this summer. You came home with blisters on your feet and never complained once. I was proud of that job, I said simply. It was the first thing I earned entirely on my own. He replaced the frame, then turned to face me directly. I owe you an apology, Maya. A real one, not just acknowledgement that I was wrong about your business acumen. I failed to see your vision because it didn't match mine. I dismissed your path because it wasn't the one I would have chosen. In doing so, I missed watching something remarkable unfold. The words landed with unexpected force. Not because I'd been waiting for his approval, I'd moved beyond that need years ago, but because they represented a genuine shift in perspective. Not just seeing my success, but understanding the values behind it. Thank you, I said quietly. That means something to me. My mother stepped forward, uncharacteristically hesitant. I don't know how to fix what we broke, she admitted. I'm not even sure when it started breaking. We don't need to fix everything in one day, I replied. Some things take time to rebuild. Just like Rosewood did. She nodded, glancing around. The office with new eyes. You named it after Grandma Rose, didn't you? Not just the flowers. It was a connection no one else had made, that my quiet, determined grandmother had been my true inspiration, not the family name or legacy. Yes, I acknowledged. She built something from nothing too. Ellen told me the story. She would have been so proud, my mother said softly. So am I, Maya. Belatedly, but genuinely. Vanessa approached next, looking uncharacteristically vulnerable without her usual armor of perfect makeup and calculated poise. I don't know what to say, she admitted. Sorry seems inadequate for uninviting you to your own venue. It wasn't my venue to you, I pointed out. It was just Rosewood, the exclusive place everyone wants. Still, we're sisters. I should have. She trailed off, then tried again. When I saw the locket in my suite yesterday, Grandma's locket, I thought it was from Mom. I never imagined. You still cared enough to give me something meaningful, even after everything. Of course I care. Family is complicated, but it's still family. She looked at me with genuine curiosity. How are you not bitter? I would be furious if our situations were reversed. I considered the question carefully. Bitterness takes energy I needed elsewhere. Building Rosewood required everything I had, my focus, my creativity, my determination. I couldn't spare the emotional resources for resentment too. That's actually profound, Andrew said, speaking up for the first time in a while. Choosing creation over resentment. It wasn't always a conscious choice, I admitted. There were nights I laid awake replaying old hurts, drafting scathing speeches I'd never deliver. But each morning, there was work to do, real work that mattered. That eventually became more compelling than any grudge. As the group prepared to depart, the newlyweds for their honeymoon, my parents back to their normal lives, there was an awkwardness to the goodbyes. Not the tension of unresolved conflict, but the uncertainty of relationships being recalibrated, of new understandings still finding their footing. My father shook my hand formally, then surprised me by pulling me into a brief hug. "I'm proud of you," he said simply. My mother embraced me longer, whispering, "We have so much to catch up on." Real conversations this time. Vanessa hesitated, then asked, "Would you come to dinner when we get back from our honeymoon? Just you and me? I'd like to start over. I guess." "I'd like that," I said, meaning it. As I watched them drive away, standing on the steps of the property I had transformed from neglect to excellence, I felt something settle within me, not the vindication I might once have imagined, but a quieter sense of completion. Of circles closing and new ones beginning. Ellen lingered after the others had gone, joining me on the steps. "Well," she asked. "Was it what you expected?" "No," I admitted. "It was more human somehow. Less dramatic, more real." "That's usually how healing works," she observed. "Not in grand gestures or perfect apologies, but in small moments. Of genuine seeing. Of recognition." I nodded, watching the last car disappear down the winding drive. "I didn't build Rosewood for them," I said. "But I'm glad they finally saw it. Saw me. And more importantly, you saw yourself clearly through the whole process," Ellen added. "That's the real victory here." She was right, I realized. The true transformation wasn't the property, impressive as it was. It wasn't even the family dynamics beginning to shift like tectonic plates after years of stasis. It was the journey. From that young server with something to prove to this woman who stood firmly in her own accomplishment, not defined by rejection or approval, but by the substance of what she had created. "What comes next?" Ellen asked as we turned to walk back inside. I smiled, thinking of the expansion plans on my desk, the Michigan property waiting for my vision, the team I'd built who believed in Rosewood's mission as deeply as I did. "More building," I said simply. But this time, with nothing to prove to anyone but myself. The Monday after the wedding dawned with a clarity that seemed fitting. The sky was that perfect shade of blue that photographers spend careers trying to capture, the air crisp enough to feel invigorating but warm enough to promise summer's continuation. I woke before my alarm, feeling strangely light, as if something heavy had been set down after being carried for too long. My morning routine remained unchanged: yoga, shower, breakfast while reviewing the day's schedule, but something was different. It wasn't that the world had transformed overnight. Rosewood was still Rosewood. I was still its creator and guardian. But the lens through which I viewed everything had shifted slightly, bringing certain things into sharper focus while softening others. At my desk by 7 a.m., I found myself looking at the framed server name tag with new eyes. For years, it had been a reminder of determination in the face of dismissal, of choosing my own path when others tried to dictate it. Today, it seemed more like a milestone marker, not just of where I'd begun, but of a journey with many chapters, both completed and yet to be written. My executive team meeting was scheduled for 9 a.m., our weekly gathering to align priorities and address challenges. Today's agenda included finalizing details for the Michigan property acquisition, reviewing summer staffing levels, and discussing a potential collaboration with a renowned chef for our fall culinary series. As the team assembled in the conference room, Jesse, Chef Marcus, our finance director Tomas, operations manager Wei, and marketing director Layla, I found myself studying their faces with renewed appreciation. These weren't just employees, they were the architects of Rosewood's success alongside me. Each had taken a chance on my vision when it was far from a guaranteed triumph. "Before we dive into the agenda," I said as the meeting began, "I want to thank all of you. This weekend was significant for me personally, as many of you know. My family finally saw what we've built here. But what matters more is that all of you saw its potential from the beginning." They exchanged glances and used to such direct expressions of gratitude from me. I was always fair and appreciative, but rarely sentimental. "Does this mean we're getting extra bonuses?" Chef Marcus joked, breaking the slight tension. I smiled. "It means I recognize that Rosewood isn't just my creation, it's ours. And as we expand, I want to ensure that's reflected in how we grow." The meeting proceeded, but with a different energy than usual. Ideas flowed more freely. Challenges were addressed more collaboratively. Even our finance director, typically the voice of cautious restraint, seemed more open to innovative approaches. As we wrapped up, Jessie lingered behind. "Something's different about you today," she observed. "Good different." "Clarity," I replied. "Sometimes you need to close one chapter completely before you can fully write the next." She nodded. "So, what's in this next chapter? Besides the Michigan property?" It was a question I'd been considering since watching my family drive away yesterday. What did come next, now that the narrative of proving myself against their dismissal had reached its natural conclusion? "Evolution," I said finally. Taking what works about Rosewood and using it to create something even more meaningful. More properties? She asked. That's part of it. But I'm thinking beyond physical expansion. About impact. She raised an eyebrow, curious but not pushing. Jessie had always been good at giving me space to develop ideas at my own pace. I'll share more when it's clearer, I promised. For now, we have a busy week ahead. And busy it was. Monday and Tuesday passed in a whirlwind of operational details and forward planning. Wednesday brought a site visit to the Michigan property, a historic lakeside estate that had once been a summer retreat for a lumber baron. The buildings needed significant restoration, but the bones were strong and the location unparalleled. Standing on the wide porch overlooking Lake Michigan, I felt that same certainty I'd experienced when first seeing Rosewood, the clear vision of what could be, not just what was. This property wouldn't be a carbon copy of our flagship. It would have its own identity, honoring its unique history while embodying the core Rosewood values of authentic luxury and meaningful hospitality. We'll preserve the original woodwork, I told the architect who had joined us for the walkthrough. The craftsmanship is irreplaceable. But the flow needs to be reimagined for modern guests, more intuitive, more connected to the landscape. He nodded, already sketching ideas. The light here is extraordinary. We should maximize the lake views in every possible space. Exactly. And we'll need to consider sustainability from the beginning, solar where possible, water conservation systems, native landscaping to reduce irrigation needs. As we continued through the property, my phone buzzed with a text. Vanessa, back from honeymoon. Still on for dinner tomorrow? I have something I want to discuss. I confirmed our plans, curious about what my sister might want to talk about. We'd scheduled dinner at a neutral location, neither Rosewood nor any place associated with our family, to begin the careful work of rebuilding our relationship. Thursday evening found me arriving at Terroir, a small farm-to-table restaurant in a neighboring town. I'd chosen it deliberately, excellent food but unpretentious, focused on quality ingredients rather than showy presentations. The kind of place that aligned with my values while still being special enough for a meaningful conversation. Vanessa was already seated when I arrived, looking slightly out of place in her designer dress amid the restaurant's rustic elegance. She'd always dressed for impression rather than comfort, a habit instilled by our mother from an early age. Maya, she said, rising to greet me with an awkward half-hug. Thank you for coming. Of course, I replied, taking the seat across from her. How was the honeymoon? Beautiful. Perfect weather in Santorini. Though I kept looking at every hotel detail and wondering what you would think of it. She gave a small laugh. I actually took notes on some of their service touches. To ask you about. The admission surprised me. Vanessa had never shown interest in my professional perspective before. That's thoughtful, I said. I'd be happy to hear your observations. The server arrived with water and menus, giving us a moment to settle into the conversation. After ordering, Vanessa seemed to gather her courage. I've been thinking a lot, she began. About Rosewood. About what you've built. About how I never really saw it, or you, until now. It's easy to miss what you're not looking for, I said, not unkindly. That's just it, she replied, leaning forward. I wasn't looking. I was so caught up in what success was supposed to look like, the right job, the right husband, the right address, that I couldn't recognize it in any other form. I nodded, encouraging her to continue. Seeing Rosewood, understanding what you've created, it made me question everything I thought I knew about achievement. About what matters. She took a sip of water, gathering her thoughts. I'm not happy, Maya. The frank admission caught me off guard. Vanessa had always been the poster child for our family's definition of success, the prestigious degree, the high-paying finance job, the socially advantageous marriage. In what way? I asked carefully. In every way that counts. My job is soul-crushing but impressive at cocktail parties. My marriage is. She hesitated. Andrew and I look perfect on paper. In reality, we barely connect. Even our wedding was more about appearance than meaning. I'm sorry, I said, genuinely meaning it. I had no idea. How could you? I never let anyone see beneath the surface. That was the point, maintain the perfect image at all costs. She shook her head ruefully. But watching you at Rosewood, seeing how you interact with your team, how you speak about your work with such purpose and passion, it broke something open in me. Our first course arrived, locally foraged mushrooms with herb oil and fresh cheese. We paused while the server described the dish, then resumed our conversation. What are you thinking of doing? I asked after taking a bite. That's what I wanted to discuss with you, she said. I've been considering a career change for a while. Something more meaningful, more aligned with what I actually care about. Which is education, believe it or not. She smiled self-consciously. I've been volunteering with a literacy program in underserved communities. It's the only thing in my week I genuinely look forward to. This was a side of Vanessa I'd never seen, or perhaps had never been allowed to see. The carefully maintained facade of the perfect daughter had hidden depths I hadn't suspected. That sounds fulfilling, I said. What's stopping you from pursuing it? Fear, mostly. Of disappointing everyone. Of starting over in my 30s. Of admitting I've been on the wrong path. She met my eyes directly. Of facing what you faced when you chose your own way. I considered my response carefully. This wasn't about me, but my experience could perhaps offer something valuable. The disapproval is difficult, I acknowledged. But it's temporary. What's permanent is the cost of not living authentically, that accumulates daily, in small compromises. That eventually become a life you don't recognize or want. She nodded slowly. How did you find the courage? To walk away from everything that was expected of you? It wasn't one moment of grand courage, I explained. It was 1,000 tiny decisions to honor what I knew was right for me, even when everyone around me questioned it. Each small choice built strength for the next one. And the loneliness? Because I know there would be loneliness. There was, I admitted. Profound at times. But it created space for new connections based on who I actually am, not who I was pretending to be. My team at Rosewood, they know the real me in ways our family never did, until recently. Our main courses arrived, sustainably caught fish for Vanessa, heritage vegetable composition for me. As we ate, the conversation shifted to more practical considerations. I have a proposal, Vanessa said eventually. It might sound strange, given our history. I'm listening. Rosewood is expanding, right? You mentioned the Michigan property. New growth requires new perspectives. She took a breath. I want to work with you. Not in a senior role, I haven't earned that. But somewhere I can learn the business from the ground up, the way you did. I set down my fork, genuinely surprised. You want to work at Rosewood? I want to work somewhere with purpose. Somewhere that creates value instead of just extracting it. Somewhere I can rebuild my life based on what matters to me, not what impresses others. She smiled slightly. It just happens that my sister has built exactly that kind of place. It wouldn't be easy, I warned. I wouldn't give you special treatment. If anything, I'd probably be harder on you than other employees. I'm counting on that, she replied. I don't want another shortcut. I've had enough of those to last a lifetime. I studied her, looking for signs of the old Vanessa, the expectation of privilege, the assumption that rules could be bent for her benefit. Instead, I saw something new, humility mixed with determination, vulnerability alongside resolve. Start in guest services, I said finally. 3 months minimum. Learn every aspect of the guest experience from check-in to turndown. After that, we can discuss where your skills might best fit in the organization. Relief and something like joy spread across her face. Really? You'll give me a chance? Everyone deserves the opportunity to rewrite their story, Vanessa. Even you. Especially you. We finished dinner with lighter conversation, practical details about start dates and housing options, the Michigan property's potential, my vision for Rosewood's future. It wasn't the relationship we'd had as children, before expectations and choices drove us in different directions, but it was something new and potentially more authentic. As we walked to our cars afterward, Vanessa hesitated, then asked, Do you think Mom and Dad will ever really understand? The choices you've made, the choices I'm making now? I considered the question carefully. Understanding requires openness, the willingness to see beyond your own perspective. Dad showed glimpses of that capacity at the wedding. Mom might take longer. But people can surprise you if you give them the chance. Like I surprised you tonight? She asked with a small smile. Exactly like that, I agreed. We parted with another slightly awkward hug, but one that felt more genuine than any interaction we'd had in years. As I drove back to Rosewood, I found myself reflecting on the unexpected turns life can take, how relationships presumed broken beyond repair can find new forms if given space and honesty. The following Monday, I called a special meeting with my executive team. We gathered not in the formal conference room but in the small courtyard garden, my favorite thinking space on the property, where ideas seemed to flow more freely among the herbs and flowering vines. I've been considering Rosewood's next chapter, I began. Not just in terms of physical expansion, but in terms of impact and legacy. They listened attentively, these people who had helped transform my vision into reality. The Michigan property will proceed as planned, I continued. But alongside it, I want to launch something new, the Rosewood Initiative. I outlined the concept I'd been developing since the wedding weekend, a program to identify and support promising individuals from non-traditional backgrounds who wanted to enter the hospitality industry. Not just scholarships, but comprehensive training, mentorship, and eventual job placement within our growing organization or with our network of partners. Many of us didn't take conventional paths to get here, I explained. We found our way. Through determination and someone giving us a chance. I want Rosewood to be that chance for others. The idea resonated immediately. Wei spoke of his journey from dishwasher to operations manager. Layla shared how a community college program had been her only access to marketing education when prestigious universities were financially out of reach. Chef Marcus described the mentor who had seen potential in him when others saw only a rough-edged kid from a struggling neighborhood. We'll start small, I said. 5 participants in the first cohort. Comprehensive training, living wage stipends, housing assistance. Real opportunity, not token charity. Where will we find candidates? Tomas asked, already thinking practically. Everywhere talent is overlooked, I replied. Community colleges. Service industry workers seeking advancement. Career changers. With transferable skills but no direct experience. Like your sister? Jessie asked with a knowing smile. Word of Vanessa's upcoming role had already circulated among the senior team. Among others, I acknowledged. Though she'll be applying and participating like anyone else, no special treatment. By the end of the meeting, the Rosewood Initiative had transformed from concept to action plan, with each team member volunteering to oversee different aspects of its development. What had begun as my personal reflection had become a collective mission, exactly as the best ideas should. Later that afternoon, I walked the Rosewood grounds alone, taking the path that wound through the rose gardens and down to the small pond at the property's edge. The estate was quiet on Mondays, no events scheduled, just the normal operations of our small hotel component and restaurant. I found myself at the oldest tree on the property, a massive oak that predated even the original manor house. Its branches spread wide, creating a natural sanctuary beneath. Early in Rosewood's renovation, I'd placed a simple bench here, a spot for contemplation away from the bustle of daily operations. Sitting on that bench, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. Not just the professional path from server to owner, but the personal evolution from someone defined by rejection to someone defined by creation. The shift from building to prove others wrong to building because it was deeply, authentically right. My phone buzzed with a text from my father. Your mother and I are considering that dinner invitation for next weekend. Any dress code we should be aware of? I smiled at the formal wording, so characteristic of him, trying to find proper protocol for this new territory of relating to me as an equal, as someone whose world had rules he needed to learn rather than dictate. Casual elegant, I replied. We're not formal at Rosewood unless the occasion demands it. 3 dots appeared. As he typed a response, looking forward to seeing your world through new eyes. The simple acknowledgement, that he recognized he'd been seeing through a limited lens, meant more than any elaborate apology could have. I pocketed my phone and gazed up through the oak's branches to the patches of blue sky beyond. The metaphor wasn't lost on me, how perspective changes depending on where you stand, how the same reality can look entirely different when viewed from a new position. Rosewood had never been about revenge or vindication. It had been about creating something that aligned with my deepest values, quality without pretension, luxury defined by meaning rather than price tag, hospitality that honored both guest and server equally. The fact that my family now recognized its worth was satisfying, but secondary to the knowledge that I had built something true to my vision. As I walked back toward the main building, I passed a young woman on our housekeeping staff carefully arranging fresh flowers in the entrance hall. She was new, hired just last month, but already showing uncommon attention to detail and aesthetic sensibility. Those arrangements are beautiful, Zoe, I said, pausing to admire her work. You have a natural eye for composition. She looked up, surprised to be addressed directly by the owner. Thank you, Ms. Michaels. I used to help at my aunt's flower shop on weekends. Never thought those skills would be useful here. Every experience shapes what we bring to our work, I replied. Nothing is wasted if you know how to apply it. She nodded thoughtfully. I've been wanting to ask, is it true there might be opportunities to learn more about event design here? I overheard something about a new training initiative. The Rosewood Initiative, I confirmed. We're just developing it now. Are you interested in expanding your skills in that direction? Very much, she said, straightening with newfound confidence. I've been taking online courses in event management on my days off. It's what I hope to do eventually. I saw something in her expression I recognized, that quiet determination, that willingness to invest in herself even when the path forward wasn't clearly marked. Talk to Jessie about the application process when it's announced, I suggested. And in the meantime, I'll make sure you can shadow our events team during your regular shifts when possible. The gratitude in her eyes was familiar too, the look of someone not accustomed to having their potential recognized, to being seen for what they could become rather than just what they currently did. As I continued to my office, I realized that this was perhaps the most meaningful legacy I could create, not just beautiful spaces or exceptional experiences, but opportunities for others to define success on their own terms, to build lives of purpose and authenticity. The path I'd walked, from rejection to reinvention, from being dismissed to creating something undeniable, wasn't just my story. It was a template that could serve others facing their own crossroads between expectation and aspiration. At my desk, I opened my laptop and began typing notes for the speech I would give at the Rosewood Initiative's formal launch next month. Not about my personal journey or family redemption, but about the philosophy that had guided Rosewood from the beginning, that true excellence comes not from inheritance or advantage, but from vision, determination, and the courage to build something authentic in a world that often rewards conformity. My sister would be in the audience, along with my parents, godmother Ellen, and the executive team. But most importantly, so would people like Zoe, those at the beginning of their own journey, ready to write their own definition of success. The words flowed easily, powered by conviction rather than vindication. This wasn't an ending, but a continuation, the next chapter in a story still unfolding, still growing beyond its origins into something more meaningful than I could have imagined when I first walked away from expectations and toward possibility. Outside my window, the sun was setting over Rosewood's gardens, painting everything in warm golden light. The property glowed not with ostentation, but with the quiet radiance of something built with integrity and purpose. It was beautiful not despite its journey from neglect to restoration, but because of it, every challenge overcome, every detail reconsidered, every principle honored in its creation. Just like its creator. I closed my laptop, content to let tomorrow's work wait for tomorrow. Tonight was for appreciation of the path traveled, the present moment, and the future still waiting to be shaped by hands willing to build something true. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell, so you don't miss any upload from us.